Recording in progress. Okay, if you would, bow with me in prayer, please. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you this day and we thank you and we praise you, Lord, for who you are. Lord, we thank you for everyone coming out and making their presentation. And Lord, we just ask for you to give us wisdom and guidance and direction as we go through this topic. And Lord, may we make the decision that is pleasing and that is for the good of the citizens of this state. And all these things I pray in your precious name. Amen. Professor, if you would like to come up, this is a professor with the Georgia State University College of Law. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. For Chairman Gaines, when he gets here, and for the honored committee, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to explain the current litigation against the FDA related to the vaping industry and electronic nicotine delivery devices. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Anjali Deshmukh, and I'm a health law scholar at Georgia State University College of Law. And I focus on FDA regulations, pricing, and policies related to pharmaceutical products, drugs, medical devices, and the like. I graduated from Stanford Law School and was a life science litigator prior to joining the Legal Academy. In addition, I am a board-certified pediatrician. I graduated from Vanderbilt School of Medicine and completed my pediatric residency at Stanford Lucile Packard Children's Hospital. And I've practiced pediatrics for about a decade. Please note, my views are my own, and I do not represent my employers or any organization. Further, I'm here to provide background information related to my area of expertise. I'm not here to endorse or oppose any proposed legislation or regulation related to vaping products. Second, I want to reiterate that unfortunately, I need to leave close to 1:45. As I think people have mentioned, I have a classroom full of law students waiting for me, and I believe it's generally frowned upon if the professor is late. So again, I apologize for not being able to answer additional questions. If you have additional questions, please follow up with me by email, or I'm happy to come back at another time to follow up. So with that, let me jump in. I'm here to talk about FDA's role in regulation of e-cigarettes and tobacco products. And this is a complicated story. It honestly stretches back decades. The full story stretches back to before the United States was founded in many ways. But don't worry, I'm not going to start there. I'm going to walk you through the last few years of litigation. But the big takeaway that I want you to remember is that tobacco is a lucrative industry, and federal regulations are constantly being challenged. The FDA was charged with regulating tobacco products in 2009. And while FDA is a powerful agency, it's also a single agency with limits. It has limited resources, limited budget, limited staff, and so much more. They are subject to the requirements of administrative law, and FDA has faced significant litigation over its regulation of vaping products. They've won a number of cases, but not all of them. And there will be a Supreme Court decision on this issue in the 2024 term. So as I'm talking about federal regulation, I also want you to remember an important principle: federalism. States have traditionally held police powers around health and safety of citizens, and historically, states have played a very important complementary role to federal regulation. While I'm explaining federal regulation, please know it doesn't preclude complementary state actions, and I'm happy to provide concrete examples of dual regulation between states and the FDA in other areas. So let's start in 2009. Congress enacted the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which empowered the FDA to regulate tobacco. Congress stated the Tobacco Control Act was meant to, and I quote, ensure that the FDA had the authority to address issues of particular concern to public health officials. especially the use of tobacco by young people and dependence on tobacco. Another purpose was to provide new and flexible enforcement authority to ensure that there is an effective oversight of the tobacco industry's efforts to develop, introduce, and promote less harmful products. So this law is ultimately about protecting public health and protecting children from accessing and becoming addicted to tobacco products. Congress determined that the dangers of tobacco are well known. They concluded it is the foremost preventable cause of premature death in the US, and past efforts to curb tobacco use by adolescents have failed. So they gave the FDA broad authority to regulate tobacco products, requiring that new tobacco products receive authorization from the FDA prior to marketing. Anything that was not sold prior to 2007 was a new product and had to get authorization from the FDA. Now, a manufacturer can obtain pre-market authorization through primarily two channels. The first is by submitting a pre-market tobacco application, a PMTA. And that's demonstrating that the product would be appropriate for the protection of public health. The second mechanism is by submitting a report that shows the product is substantially equivalent to a tobacco product that was commercially marketed before 2007. Now, because these ENDS technology are relatively young, meaning that there are really just a few products on the market before February 2007, ENDS products and e-liquids are effectively required to submit the pre-market tobacco product application, again known as the PMTAs. Now, some courts have found the PMTA process to be onerous because it requires manufacturers to gather a significant amount of information. I kind of giggle at that because I'm used to looking at the processes for drugs and medical devices. It's relative. For an industry that hasn't been regulated before, it is a lot. But if we look at other FDA regulations, it's not quite as rigorous. So what's actually required is a manufacturer has to submit to the FDA information on the product's health risks, its ingredients, and the manufacturing process. The manufacturer also has to provide samples of the product and its proposed labeling. Now, e-cigarettes and their component parts, which includes e-liquids, came under the FDA jurisdiction in 2016. In May, FDA deemed these products to be subject to the Tobacco Control Act. So let me be exceptionally clear about what that means. With that deeming, FDA is required by Congress to deny a PMTA unless the e-cigarette manufacturers shows that the product would be appropriate for the protection of public health. Now, you're going to see that abbreviated APPH, and that's what it means, appropriate for the protection of public health. FDA determines if an application is appropriate for the protection of public health based on an evaluation of the risks and benefits for the population as a whole, as demonstrated by well-controlled investigations or other scientifically valid evidence. And that is coming from Congress. And that includes a consideration of, also from Congress, the increased or decreased likelihood that existing users of tobacco products will stop using the products, as well as the increased or decreased likelihood that those who do not use tobacco will start using the products. So let me say that in somewhat simpler terms. By statute, FDA is obligated to deny a PMTA unless the e-cigarette in question would benefit an adult user over the harms of non-users like children. A non-compliant manufacturer's product can be designated as adulterated or misbranded, and that could result in civil penalties as well as seizure of the products. So there are some serious consequences if FDA brings an enforcement action. FDA is limited in its ability to bring enforcement actions because, like I said, it's a single agency with limited resources. FDA has publicly declared that it's prioritizing enforcement against products that have not submitted a PMTA application and for flavored products. But as you can imagine, in 2016, this created a timeline issue. E-cigarettes had been on the market for years, and it was an emerging tobacco product. It was rapidly growing and widely popular in many parts of the United States. So FDA decided that it was going to delay enforcement of this 2016 rule with a series of staggered deadlines that would allow the companies to keep their products on the market while they were submitting these applications. FDA was sued over this timeline, and eventually a court determined that the applications must be in by September 9th, 2020. And an avalanche of applications came in. In an FDA press release, they said they got 26 million applications. That included 6.7 that came before the deadline and another 18 million that were filed afterward. And FDA addressed 99% by March 15, 2023. The vast majority was denied. By the middle of 2023, about 23 products were approved. Now there's 34. But I want to just take a minute and have sympathy for the poor workers at the FDA at this point, because this is really a Herculean task. They're coming up with an enforcement scheme on top of a rapidly moving industry with new data emerging all the time. One of the big problems that came out is a new condition known as EVALI. In 2019, a hospital in Oregon found an association between vaping and a severe, devastating lung disease. And over the next year, between 2019 and 2020, over 2,500 cases were identified across the United States, resulting in 62 deaths. 15% of those cases were children. So FDA is dealing with regulating these products connected to this emerging new condition, as well as addressing new data on teen preferences and smoking prevention efforts, if they're actually as successful as originally thought. So it's a moving field. And in light of this shifting public health crisis and the newly emerging data, FDA issued a series of documents to help manufacturers file these PMTAs to address the questions and really summarize the FDA's current thinking. Now, this is very standard practice at the FDA. It does it in the drug space. It does it in the in the device space. Almost all administrative agencies do some form of this. For ENDS, FDA issued a 2019 guidance. They issued a proposed rule. They issued a 2020 guidance and a few more. And typically, courts treat these guidances as having very little weight. It's what the agency is thinking at the time. It's not dispositive. So in that background, let's talk about flavored product. FDA established that the sale of flavored vaping products, as opposed to tobacco flavored, amplifies the risk that kids will start using them. This is a gateway drug. At the same time, they haven't found reliable evidence that flavored vaping products offer a real advantage over tobacco flavored vaping products. And the advantage would be to either help addicted smokers quit smoking or reduce their habits. And honestly, despite years of trying, FDA has also decided they haven't found a meaningful way to identify marketing or access restrictions that work to prevent children from obtaining flavored vaping products in the first place. FDA concluded that a lot of the historically relied upon access restrictions at point of sale just don't work, because most kids get their vaping products through friends or social networks. So I think about this as a stress relief ball. When companies apply pressure on one aspect of the current system, teenagers flock to other avenues to get their vaping products. The problem is these products appeal to children. So on August 26, 2021, the FDA announced that it was going to deny the PMTAs for 55,000 flavored e-cigarettes. FDA decided almost all flavored e-cigarettes cannot be appropriate for the protection of public health, and therefore they must be denied. I say almost all because they did allow menthol products, which is a flavor, but is a little more of a traditional flavor. So in their press release, the FDA explained that it likely needed evidence from long-term studies to grant these PMTAs for flavored e-cigarettes. There was an internal memo in July at the FDA where FDA's approach to reviewing these products was a fatal flaw approach. If it was a flavored product and they didn't show that long-term data that it was beneficial for addicted users over current flavored tobacco, it would be denied. So as you can imagine, the applicants were not happy about this. When they were denied widely, lawsuits followed, especially from large companies who had resources to file suits. So broadly speaking, there's a lot of ways to attack an agency. I make my administrative law students build a sort of toolkit of all the ways you can attack an agency and all the ways an agency can defend itself. Don't worry, I won't make you do that today. All of the lawsuits came from all over the United States, and they attacked similar but slightly different issues. And they came in waves. The first wave tried to challenge the 2016 deeming clause to say it was not within FDA's authority. There was a number of cases, but the one I would want to highlight was the Fifth Circuit case, Big Time Vapes versus FDA. This is a 2020 case. The company tried to argue that the Tobacco Control Act did not properly delegate authority to the FDA. Now, I'm going to say, as an admin law nerd myself, this is a fun argument. A lot of commentators thought a non-delegation case would appeal to various members of the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court. There's actually been a non-delegation case at the Fifth Circuit related to another case, but putting aside all of that, reading the tea leaves, the judicial opinions here, the Fifth Circuit summarily dismissed the non-delegation argument under the Tobacco Control Act. Congress had used really strong language in the bill that, in their mind, clearly granted the FDA authority. And honestly, Congress's strong language isn't really surprising given the history of this. The Clinton administration tried to regulate tobacco, and in a landmark Supreme Court case in 2000, FDA's authority to regulate tobacco at that point was heavily questioned and demanded that Congress speak in very clear language. So some may be concerned about the future challenges to FDA's authority under something like the major question doctrine, or saying FDA doesn't have the authority to regulate here. It's a possibility, but in light of the other facts and the way this law is written, I'm not sure that is the strongest concern. The wave of litigation that we are currently in questions FDA's process for evaluating these flavored products. Now, most of these cases, the opinions have come out between 2022 and 2024. So this wave of litigation is far from over. A consistent idea was that the regulated parties didn't have enough notice of what was required prior to FDA's statement. Another argument is that FDA changed its position on what was required. There was also accusations that FDA didn't consider the marketing plans in enough detail, and that was a countermeasure for the appeal to children. But all of this is really arguing about how do you read those FDA guidances that came out regarding these applications, and how much is a company able to rely on them. And it goes through a lot of the public as well as the internal statements about the agency's position. Now, these cases have come across all over the country. Most of these court cases have sided with the FDA. There are a couple big exceptions out of the Fifth Circuit and a case out of the 11th Circuit. And when I say most cases sided with the FDA, I mean that. We have 12 regional circuit courts that could potentially have ruled on this case. 10 have considered challenges so far. And the Second Circuit, the Third Circuit, the Fourth Circuit, the Sixth Circuit, the Seventh Circuit, the Ninth Circuit, the 10th Circuit, and the DC Circuit have all sided with the FDA. Those courts say that the Tobacco Control Act expressly authorizes the FDA to consider comparative evidence, and that FDA acted well within Congress's statutory directive when it compared the claimed cessation benefits of flavored and non-flavored products. In these courts' views, the statutory appropriate for the protection of public health consideration is, quote, inherently comparative. And they directed the FDA to weigh the risk of hooking new users on tobacco products against a product's potential to help existing users switch from unhealthier forms of tobacco. So let me walk you through the two circuits that disagreed and why I think this is worth watching and knowing about. The 11th Circuit concluded that the FDA arbitrarily and capriciously denied the PMTAs because the agency refused to consider the marketing plan. They concluded it wasn't harmless error, but remanded it back to the FDA to reconsider, acknowledging the FDA did not have to come up to a different argument. So that didn't change national policy. The case to watch is Wages and White Line Investments versus FDA. So this was a Fifth Circuit en banc decision that decided the FDA's actions was arbitrary and capricious and should be overturned. When I say en banc, I meant all of the judges on the appeals court weighed in. So we got a majority of about 10 judges and a dissent of about 6. And this is about if it's appropriate to sell product for the public health, to sell products with flavor. And some of the flavor names were Jimmy the Juice Man Peach Strawberry, Iced Pineapple Express, and one of my personal favorites, Killer Custard Blueberry, custard with a K. Now, the Fifth Circuit agreed with the 11th Circuit, but went much farther and said that FDA is imposing new requirements without adequate notice and with changing its position. In that court's view, the court's pre-submission deadline guidance documents expressly stated that long-term studies were not expected and invited petitioners to rely on existing data of unflavored products to inform their conclusions about flavored products. And the courts characterized FDA's position as a turnaround that didn't consider the industry's reliance interests. And that's an opposite to the other circuit's findings. Now, I'm going to say this is a more complicated question. This is a circuit split that we have. And to the extent the Fifth Circuit implicitly answered what should be an appropriate public health standard, the circuits answered it differently. There's also an important administrative law principles question. This is about reliance, fair notice, and change in position. Those same doctrines were analyzed by the other circuits to come out in a different way in a very similar case. It's also about how do you interpret these guidance documents. There's a third unrelated Fifth Circuit case that relates to venue in terms of where can you bring these suits. And again, the Fifth Circuit had a different read than the other circuits. So putting this all together, this circuit split undermines FDA's effort to have a uniform national policy. And as of June of this year, the Supreme Court agreed to hear this case to resolve the split. Now, I say to my class in the ever-shifting world of administrative law, stay tuned. And I'm going to say the same thing to you. The court may expand, curtail, or shift FDA's ability to regulate in this space. And that means that it's possible regulations to try to protect children from becoming addicted to killer custard blueberry flavored nicotine may come unraveled. Broadly speaking, a lot of the cases before the Supreme Court seem to be suspicious of agency expertise. I don't make predictions on Supreme Court outcomes. I've made 2 in my life and I have a 100% track record and I'm keeping it that way. I'm not going to make a prediction here, but I will say this case is occurring at a time of shifting views of agency expertise. And the most recent term of Supreme Court cases has made it easier for litigants to challenge agencies' policies in a number of meaningful ways. Now, to be clear, the challenge to FDA here is not related to the Chevron doctrine or Loper or anything you might have read about. It's a different legal argument, but that's not to say we may not see Chevron Loper challenges in the next wave of litigation. I think that is the one thing I can say as a confident prediction. FDA is going to face more challenges here. There's well-funded economic interests on both sides of this issue. And in a lot of ways, challenges to agency action are becoming easier. So This is and will remain an expensive, messy, highly litigated area. Now, I'm going to wrap up, but I want to just leave 2 points with you. First, I want you to know that the FDA is also empowered to impose additional rules by regulation, such as minimum age restrictions and mandatory health warnings. In December 2019, the FDA created a minimum age to purchase tobacco products of 21 years old that applies nationally. Second, I've mentioned that about 34 products are approved from 3 manufacturers. All of this is publicly available in a searchable database on FDA's website, and I'm happy to provide you the link if that would be helpful. Now, I'm happy to take a few questions before I get to class, but I also want to just say why I am scrambling to be here before class. This is a really important issue. So putting on my pediatrician hat for a second, we know e-cigarettes are the most common tobacco product that are used by children. And there's substantial risks associated with children trying electronic cigarettes. We know nicotine is highly addictive, and we know the adolescent brain is vulnerable to the rewarding effects of nicotine. We also know that in addition to nicotine, most e-cigarettes contain and emit numerous toxic substances. Congress has done extensive fact-finding on this. They concluded that virtually all new tobacco users under the minimum legal age to purchase such products still do. They concluded that the advertising and marketing contribute significantly to the use of these products by teenagers. I have personally had to explain to a 12-year-old that e-cigarettes contain nicotine. She misunderstood and thought e-cigarettes were safer compared to traditional products. And I'll be honest, that haunts me. I'm scrambling to be here because I care about keeping children safe. I don't think anyone in the vaping industry wants to hurt children. That includes our next speaker who works in that industry. I didn't speak to him about this, but I'm pretty sure he does not want to sell his products to children or promote nicotine addiction to children. The focus of e-cigarettes has been and should be assisting those who are already addicted, not creating a whole new group of youth becoming addicted. I also know one more thing. As a study committee, you are making incredibly impactful decisions in this area. I know the state of Georgia is committed to protecting the health and safety of children in Georgia. And I ask that as you consider the path forward, that you be crystal clear that Georgia stands with protecting children. Effective policy measures are essential to controlling the tobacco epidemic and protecting children's health. And that includes the sale of nicotine delivery systems to children that should be prohibited on the federal level, as well as prohibited in state and local regulations. So thank you again, and I am happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you for being here, and my apologies for being late. I think you'll find when you head to class, traffic is bad in Atlanta, so I apologize. I had a couple questions, and if you already talked about them, feel free to, I can catch myself up later. But one of the, and there's a couple more questions. I know you have a hard stop at 1:45, is that right? We got 5 minutes, so we'll do quick. But one of the things that I can't seem to get a clear answer on from anybody is, there's these 34 products that have been noted, as you said, that the FDA has cleared. But then you have all these unknown products, including, Elf Bar, which is just an example. It's like the most popular vape product in America. But from what I understand, it's not a legal product. And I can never get a clear answer. Is it legal? Like, are these products that are not on the 34 legal to be sold in the United States or not? To me, that should be a clear answer, but obviously it's very muddy.
So I think about this in terms of buckets. There are 4 buckets. On one bucket, you have the approved products. The second bucket are the products that are pending review. The third buckets, and maybe this is the third and a fourth, but the products that have been reviewed and denied. There's a sub bucket in there because some of them have engaged in lawsuits and requested a stay of the denial. The fourth bucket is the one that you're referring to, the illegal that the illegal products that have not had any application filed to the FDA. And this is where I was talking about FDA limitations. FDA is a single agency. They received 26 million applications. That's not even reflective of all the products out there. FDA is focusing its enforcement actions, as it's publicly declared, on these products that have not filed an application. The other three buckets are in a little bit of a murkier state. In terms of legal or not, I can tell you right now, the FDA's enforcement authority is, according to the FDA, focused on the flavored products and the ones with no application. The ones that are stayed by a court are, of course, in a different bucket of legality than the ones that are pending review. I hope that clarifies a little bit, or at least gives you a framework of how to put all of these products in some sort of mechanism to follow.
No, it does. One of the things that we keep hearing is that the FDA is frankly not doing its job enforcing the law. And so one of the things that we looked at last session, and then I think we're going to take a look at next session, is legislation to find a way at the state level to enforce what the FDA won't do. And so the way we looked at it was through a directory language that would basically create a state level directory that way retailers would know what they're selling is legal or not legal. And then the Department of Revenue, which is going and seeing these folks regularly anyway, would enforce that. Do you think there's merit to that idea? I mean,
So I am not going to comment on any legislation, especially if I haven't had a chance to review it in advance. But I will say this idea of FDA is not doing its job. I think it's fair to say FDA is a single agency with limited resources. For the number of products on the market, I'm not sure any one agency with a limited budget could do it. If you can imagine the enforcement effort and the enforcement effort that it would take a significant amount of resources. And this is, again, where I say the concept of federalism comes in so many points if we think about the DEA, for example, you have a federal DEA, but a lot of states have their own DEA restrictions. Federalism is this idea that states and the federal government work in partnership to regulate complex issues. Now, like I said, I'm not going to comment on any particular bill, but there is a role in states and local government to keep flavored tobacco out of the hands of children.
And this will be my last question. There were a couple other questions, but one of the things, and I thought it was a great bill because I sponsored it, so I'm biased. But one of the arguments we kind of kept hearing against the bill, and that I'm trying to wrap my head around, is that we kept hearing there is all this litigation across the country, and certainly you've outlined some of that today. How do we craft state level legislation at a time where this litigation, and one of my thoughts was this litigation could go on for years and years and years. So we can't wait years and years and years. But how, I guess that's something I'm trying to think about in my head is how do you craft this at the time where there is so much litigation ongoing and making sure we do it right?
Well, I will definitely agree with you that this litigation has the potential to go on for a long time, whether it's on this issue or the next FDA action or the next. I think litigation around tobacco has been going on for a number of decades already. And I think your instinct that we may see future litigation is correct. I know we will see a Supreme Court opinion in this term because they have already accepted the case. But what that looks like and how that's going to impact FDA regulation is yet to be determined. So same thing I say to my students, stay tuned.
Well, I know I've asked several questions. I know you have to go
I
probably
would be
about,
happy to follow up afterward or to come back to another hearing if you.
that'd be great.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. You've been fantastic. So we really appreciate it, Professor, and tell your students hello and good luck getting to class. So thank you so much. We will move on to Lee Beckman, who is on Zoom with the Georgia Ports Authority. Do we have him ready to go?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep.
Can you hear me, Lee?
I can hear you.
All right, we can hear you and look forward to your comments. And thanks for joining us by Zoom. You're in Savannah?
I am in Savannah, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you good.
Okay, good. You know, I am going to speak to, I understand that there's been some questions about jurisdiction, state jurisdiction on, securing the supply chain with some of these products, these vape products. Hopefully you guys can see my screen now.
Yes, sir, we can.
And so I want to really speak to that and the jurisdictions that we have here at the Port Authority, working together to secure the supply chain and make sure that nothing gets through our facilities and into the interior of the country that is illegal or otherwise not not appropriate. Before I start, though, I do want to make sure everyone knows where we are located. We do have 2 deep water facilities in Savannah and in Brunswick. We have an inland barge terminal in Bainbridge, Georgia. And we also have an inland rail facility in Chatsworth. We have one under construction in Gainesville and one planned in West Central Georgia. We also have a partnership with one of our rail partners in CSX in Eastern North Carolina. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important in a second. Most of the cargo that you're discussing or concerned about with this study committee is coming through the Port of Savannah, which is the 3rd largest gateway for containerized trade in America, behind only LA Long Beach and New York, New Jersey. Certainly we are the hub for the Southeast. As you can see, we're also the fastest growing port over the past 20 years or so, with the Port of Houston gaining on us very quickly, but they're starting from a much smaller perspective. So Savannah and the Southeast, as you guys know, is growing very quickly, and you can see that evidence with the 2 ports serving the Southeast growing faster than everywhere else. This slide actually focuses on rail access, but I think what I really want y'all to see on this is how Georgia and Savannah is centrally located in the Southeast. We are actually the westernmost port on the East Coast, which gives us greater entrance into the eastern third of the United States, where 70% of the U.S. population resides. We can get
Yes, sir. We're not seeing the slides move. I don't know if that's
Oh, how about now? Is that a new slide?
there we go.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So as I was saying, our geography, leads a lot to, or provides a lot of access inland into primary markets. We can get from Savannah to as far away as Chicago in 3 days, Dallas in 3 days, and of course, Atlanta and much of the Southeast overnight. When we look at how cargo moves and how we secure and harden the supply chain, it's important for us to know about the federal jurisdictions that we have on our terminal, which were created by the Maritime Security Act of 2002. In 2002, Congress passed into law this legislation, which kind of sets the jurisdictions and who is in charge of what on our supply chain. So when you're looking at the port, I know many of you guys have been to our facility here. U.S. Coast Guard is in charge of overall port security and monitoring what we have in terms of plans for our security of our facility, but also, the vessel safety and looking at the people who are coming in and out of our country on these ships. Customs is primarily in charge of cargo enforcement. They're overseeing anything that's coming in on or off of those ships and making sure that it is secure according to either our laws or laws that where it's intending to go. They do the search for a lot of the other federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Agriculture, FDA, ICE, and the federal government. You throw three letters together, it's an agency. We actually don't cover a lot of that cargo. We don't have jurisdiction over that cargo, but we certainly work with the Customs Department or Customs and Border Protection folks, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard, to make sure that our security is up to snuff and that we're able to move our cargo efficiently and effectively. You'll see a number of other federal agencies in there that do have other focuses on our facility. Now, when you look at what our assigned duties are, according to this federal legislation, our job is to maintain order on the facility, limit access in and out of the facility. In fact, there's a 100% identification check for every person coming into or out of the facility. I don't know if you can see on my screen, but every person who comes onto our terminal has to have or be escorted by someone with the federal TWIC card. TWIC stands for Transportation Workers Identification Credential, and that they are coming onto the facility with a legitimate business need. We're also boarding vessels alongside Coast Guard for any potential security issues, and we are second in command and assist them whenever they need additional manpower. We have additional duties. Our state or our GPA police officers are state officers. We have about 160 post-certified police officers on our staff, and we have an additional about 50 non-post certified security officers as well. They do things like monitor cameras, check IDs at the gates, helping the post-certified officers complete their duties as necessary. Also, most recently, you guys in the General Assembly afforded our officers the opportunity to serve with a concurrent jurisdiction of up to 1 mile off of our facility. And that's primarily to assist local police departments with traffic control that is a result of cargo coming in and out of our terminals. One thing that is very unique about the Port of Savannah and the Georgia Ports Authority is that we are a terminal owner and operator. Many ports across the country are what is known as landlord lease facilities, meaning that they own the property, but they lease the operations out to a third party. With the Georgia Ports Authority, however, we own the facility and we are in charge of operating the terminal. We have a very large terminal here in Savannah. In fact, it's the largest single container terminal in the Western Hemisphere. Right now, we have a facility that Customs and Border Protection leases from us. It's 150,000 square feet. We are in the process of building a new facility for them, which will double their available capacity to 300,000 square feet. Customs will tell you that we have the best relationship from a port perspective with them than any other port in the nation. We are one of 2 port facilities in the nation that has a customer service center. And our job is, in terms of customer service center, of course, is to provide service to our customers, but also to negotiate and work out any issues that Customs may have with customers' cargo and find ways to mitigate and reduce those impacts, if at all possible. Customs actually works closely with all these other federal agencies and other state agencies when necessary. I like to tell folks that they search 100% of all suspicious cargo. The question is, what makes cargo suspicious? They are profiling these containers as they come and go based upon where they're coming from, who's shipping them, and what's on the inside. They also search a certain percentage of every box as well, just randomly, to make sure everyone is being honest as well. To give you an idea of what that means, if cargo is coming from Yemen, it's more likely to get searched than if it's coming from Great Britain. If I ship cargo, they don't know me, but they obviously have a relationship with the Home Depot. They may give the Home Depot a little bit more leeway than they might give me because they don't know who I am. Also, if Target is moving 10,000 boxes from point A to point B, they get to where they can trust that connection. They move 1 box from point C to point D. that's a connection they don't know, they're more likely to search that box. So they're looking at a number of things. If they have some concerns about, t-shirts having 100% Egyptian cotton, they have a lab here that they can test those products to make sure they are indeed what they say they are. So they have a very, very robust organization and one that is constantly evolving as new challenges and new concerns come up. So I do believe that's about everything that y'all might, or I figure y'all might have a question about, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions from you guys if I've missed something.
Well, thank you, Lee. We really appreciate it. Does any members of the committee have any questions? You want to talk into the mic so you can hear you?
Yes, I have one, Lee. I was down visiting your facility a couple of weeks ago, and y'all have a fantastic operation going down there, and we appreciate what y'all are doing. But my question is, some of these products that haven't been approved for sale, so they're obviously illegal to sell if they hadn't been approved. But do y'all know that y'all are looking at an illegal product? If you see that come in and you open up a container or whatever and you see it, are you testing that product to see, or do you know whether it is or is not a illegal product?
Yes, sir.
Maybe that's a trick. Well, whatever. And I don't mean to be. I just, I'm not saying that it's slipping through. You may be looking at it, but do you know it's legal or illegal? I mean,
Sure thing. The customs agents that work here do an amazing job of making sure that nothing gets through that's not supposed to get through. They are very thorough. I have myself seen products that were trademark violations that look just like they're a real thing, and they were able to suss out that they were not, in fact, the real thing. They're very thorough. Their lab here does a spectacular job of checking the validity of cargoes that come up in question. And knowing what I know about the facilities and knowing what I know about their operations down here, they're very, very thorough. And I would put them up against anybody to be able to check what is and what is not appropriate or legal to come through our nation's facilities. Now,
So this kind of follow up, and this may be a dumb question, but so who is doing the inspection, and what's the relationship, I guess, between customs and what y'all are doing?
so when it
And
comes to
sorry,
Yes, sir.
this goes back to the first committee meeting we had. It was fascinating. Some of the illegal vapes that we saw coming in from China in particular, they were literally in flashlights. Looked like if you open up the box, it looked like a box of flashlights, but inside the flashlights was tons of vapes, and they were illegally bringing them into the country. How does the inspection on something like that work? Is that, I guess that's kind of, is a follow-up to Gary's question.
Yes, sir. They have a number of resources available to them. One of them is a VACIS unit. It's a vehicle and cargo inspection system. It's an X-ray machine that can see through these boxes and give you a picture similar to what you would see scanning your bag at the airport. But it's inside of a container, of course. When they are moving these boxes through that machine, if it's supposed to be a bunch of furniture and it shows up looking like a bunch of cans, they're going to pull that to their warehouse and strip that box out and do a manual search of everything that's on the inside. have obviously a large network throughout the nation to see trends and where people are hiding different things. So if they, done something like hide vapes in a flashlight in San Francisco, Savannah's going to know about it immediately and know that, hey, be on the lookout for this kind of stuff. Certainly, they have a large list of regular importers into our nation, and when there is one that is unfamiliar, they're going to put more scrutiny on that importer as well. For those legitimate importers, they have an incentive to secure their cargo and make sure that what they are moving inside their boxes is what it's supposed to be. Otherwise, they're going to be having more scrutiny placed on them, which means that their boxes are going to be slower, which means they're going to make less money. So there is an incentive, particularly for those larger customers, to make sure that they're doing what's right. There's a federal program that many of our port users are engaged in. It's called CTPAT, which stands for the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. And it is a program that allows these shippers to put more or open up more of their information to customs so that customs can see what's coming through a little bit more clearly, and it helps them move their cargo a little bit faster as well. So it sets you at a higher standard than what is required by, what's the minimum standard by the feds. So they do a pretty phenomenal job of checking these things again, and they're very, very thorough.
Any other questions? Well, Lee, thank you. We appreciate you joining us.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in person. I do hope that each of you can come back down to Savannah sometime, and be more than happy to show you our operations and explain this, in person.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for what you do every single day, and appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, we will now move on to Susan Stutzman with the Georgia Vape Alliance. Sure. And we've got y'all down for about 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Good afternoon, Chairman Gaines and committee members, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. Some of you know me already. However, those who do not, as I was introduced, I am Susan Stutzman, board member of GVA, the Georgia Vape Alliance, a shop owner in Paulding County since 2012, a wife and mom to 2 teenagers. I've been in this industry for a long time and have spoken at several of these committee meetings, yet I still get nervous. However, I'm very passionate about what I do, which gives me the courage to keep speaking. I want to start off by sharing some things that I have learned just by speaking to my teenagers and their friends. My first question is, where do the teenagers purchase these vape products? They all tell me the exact gas station and convenience stores that will sell to the minors. It's so mind-boggling, first and foremost, as a mom, yet secondly, as a vape shop owner. I take it personally because it gives me a bad reputation. Then they tell me vape shops are the hardest to purchase from. Means we're doing our job. I also have 2 letters from being secret shopped saying congratulations for protecting our youth and by IDing somebody that tried to come in and purchase under 21. The other way is their straw purchases, which is going to be older friends or siblings. Not much I can do about that. It's going to happen. However, just wanted to give you some insight on how underage kids are getting vape products. Secondly, I want to share a personal story on how vaping helped my husband quit smoking and finally quit vaping altogether. I share this to emphasize the point to step down on nicotine. He was a pack-a-day smoker. He quit smoking. He was using a peanut butter banana flavored named Elvis. And he corrected me this morning and said that there was also bacon in there because apparently that was Elvis's favorite sandwich. And it was in 18 milligrams of nicotine. He worked his way down to 0 milligrams of nicotine. Once he realized he no longer craved nicotine, he quit altogether. This would not have been possible if he didn't have access to all the different nicotine levels vape shops like us carry. It's been almost 8 years now, nicotine-free, not including quitting smoking. I still celebrate this huge accomplishment so that he can live a longer, healthier life with me and our kids. I have can I pass these down too, if that's okay? First thing I wanted you to be aware, which I'm sure as of September 5th of 2024, FDA news released that youth e-cigarette use is at its lower level in a decade. The number of middle school and high school students who currently vape has dropped by 70% from over 5.3 million to 1.63 million. So exciting. The next list is from the FDA's website of the 34 products that are approved. I have a copy of it with the arrows showing you the companies that are approved. The first one being Logic Technology. It's acquired by JTI Japan Tobacco Incorporation. Enjoy LLC. It's a parent organization to Altria, which Altria is an American corporation and one of the world's largest producers and manufacturers of tobacco and cigarettes. And the third is the R.J. Reynolds Vapor Company, parent organization, the Reynolds American, which is another American tobacco company, the second largest tobacco company here in the United States. Those are the 34 products that are approved right now. The next page shows you that there's no complete step down to 0 as an option. I pulled some of the 34 products there and highlighted you the percentage of nicotine. If you can tell that they say that they're listed in percentages as the way e-liquids are listed in milligrams. I kind of think of it as a little marketing ploy because, seeing something that says, 2.4%, whereas I say I have a 3 milligram that I vape, they sound about the same. When in fact, it's actually 3 milligrams and 24 milligrams. So a big difference there. One of the ones I wanted to point out that is approved through the FDA is the Enjoy, the daily extra menthol at 6%. That's sitting at 60 milligrams of nicotine. It's the highest level of nicotine I have ever seen of any kind of disposable, which typically is around 50 milligrams. It's over 20 times the amount of nicotine as our most popular open system e-liquid. I put a little diagram there just to show that 6% equals 60 milligrams, 4.5, 1.5.
I'm just going to hold you for 1 second. We had a special guest walk in, and I want to recognize the Senate Majority Leader, Steve Gooch. Honored to have you. We're talking about vaping. So, but thank you for being here, special guest, honored guest. And from the lower chamber, the Senate. Back to you.
And welcome. So I actually wanted to go out and see what the 6% device looked like, and purchased it. It's basically the same thing as any other disposable that we see. Same mechanism, has the same heating element, same wicking, e-liquid is in there, nicotine, all the same ingredients, yet 6%. So, and this is, this is an FDA approved item. The biggest accomplishment I think that a registry is going to achieve is to put businesses like my 2 shops out of business. It's designed and supported by Big Tobacco to ensure the monopoly on vaping products. There's only 34 approved, approximately 17,000 that we're saying are in limbo in litigation. I am not a lawyer by any means, so I apologize for my, the way, this is the way I interpret it. So vape shops and smoke shops could not survive with just the 34 products that would be sold through gas stations, which they have a whole bunch of other stuff that keeps them in business, and C-stores. They know that we're tied up in court and they want to rush this registry bill, pushing shops out of business, and that it potentially would be overturned. And then at that point, they're left with 100% of the market share of this. I've been doing this since 2012. It's, very passionate about it. Another thing that it would accomplish is that consumers would just go spend money in the neighboring states or online, or worse, black market, which we all know about black market, the potential health risk because of Ollie. What it will not accomplish is stopping the sales to minors, any impact on youth vaping, whether it's an increase or decrease, the additional state revenue from manufacturers to be listed in this registry, because manufacturers would just say, we're not going to register in the state of Georgia, and revenue from our vape tax and licensing fees. I do want to point out, GVA supports any sensible regulations against underage sales. We have self-regulated before there were laws. And I think I've spoken about it before. Since I was 2012, there was no laws on the book. I followed what cigarette followed. At that time, you were 18 to purchase. When it switched to 21, we switched to 21. We self-regulated before laws were made. However, some examples that we are, definitely think would be a great idea, mandatory ID checkers, 21 only establishment or an area. For example, like if you go in a gas station, you have to go into for alcohol, it's a 21 only, you can't go in there. Stiffer penalties for violations, increased fines for repeat offenders. After, you can lose your license and then no longer sell it. I'm all for removing cartoon and childish pictures. And finally, last, and something that I have done in my area is promote information sessionals with the school personnel. I reached out to my representative, Joseph Gillette, and he actually hooked me up with Associate Superintendent of Paulding County. And with that, I was able to have a meeting, like a grassroots type style. And I was offering my knowledge to educate teachers how to recognize the products and answer any questions they may have. And they were able to always use me as a resource. So that's kind of like the bottom line that I wanted to point out, is that I don't want underage sales as well. However, I do not want to have to close my door because we're rushing to something, as your first lady speaker was saying, that stay tuned because we don't know what's going to happen. So that's my speech.
Thank you for being here. And I think some members may have questions. I wanted to ask a couple, and then we'll go around. But how do you decide what to sell in your shop? I mean, how do you determine in your own head that it's a legal product, I guess?
How do I determine if it's an illegal product?
Or legal, either way.
I mean, I have a bookmark of everything, for the FDA's website that has everything. I know all the products, well, I don't know all of them because that are in litigate. Yes, what's the word? MDO'd. Yeah, MDO'd or whatnot. There was a little of uncertainty early on when the disposable vapes. Now, I have to remind you, I had a hard time bringing disposable vapes in. They were starting out at 50 milligrams. It was beyond me. I didn't want to. I was like, I think it's starting something else. So just me personally. And again, everybody might not agree with me. There was a very small niche that it was helpful, because I'm all about is tobacco harm reduction, is to try to get people, which we know is one of the 4th, 5th health risks that you can take care of yourself. So in saying that, but then it became this whole, when the PMTA process came out, it was a little bit confusing. I'm not going to lie. Reaching out, you mentioned the ELF bars. The minute I heard that they are no longer, it was like, boom, everything's out. I welcome anybody to come in my shop. And if I have something that they are like, that's not, I'll be the first to comply. So
But I guess my question, this is like the point of the directory, right? Is you don't know what's legal and illegal because there's no list. There's no way for you to verify that something is legal to be sold. And so can retailers want some clarity on what they can actually sell? Because you say you check the FDA website. Well, the FDA website has 34, as you mentioned. Obviously, they've been approved. And then there's those that have been denied. But as we know, there's just some amount that can be sold that are pending. So I guess what I can't understand is why retailers wouldn't want some clarity, because right now there's no way for you to know what you're selling is legal.
right.
So I will say, sorry, I will say we do our best. And to your point, there probably is a degree of stuff that's possible to miss, but we do our best to keep apprised of whenever the FDA publishes, and they do very regularly, a list of products that are being MDO'd. For example, like you talk about Elf bars and stuff like that, they will very regularly on their website, on the tobacco section, post updates about new products that they've verified are non-compliant or illicit. So they do a pretty decent job. Obviously, like you say, there's probably some stuff that is in this gray area where it's been released and the FDA hasn't announced it yet, but
So if a product, if someone applies for a PMTA today, they have a new product, would you sell it tomorrow?
No,
Why not?
because it did not go through the
Yeah, 'cause
PMTA
it-
process.
well, it's not on hold. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not technically on hold, or at least not in the same way that a product that applied before the deadline is. And there are.
And which deadline are you? referring to?
So it would be depending on if it's synthetic or traditional nicotine, either 2016 or 2018. And the
Right,
FDA
which the
does,
directory though would, that's why I guess I can't understand why there's opposition from your organization on the directory, because you're saying you're following those same deadlines. And that's what the directory would create. I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid, is someone coming in and applying for a PMTA today and you selling it tomorrow.
yeah, so I would say that is true, but there are oftentimes other things added to these registries that can cause issues where there might be an FDA compliant product that is not allowed to be sold in the States because of certain things. So it might be financial restrictions where you have something that's a $250 cost per product, where it sounds reasonable at the start, but then you consider, especially for stores like ours, the products we carry, like Susan was saying, they have a lot of step down. So there might be 5 SKUs with one flavor, and each of those would be an individual product. So then that's $1,250. And then you multiply that by a few different flavors, and then that exponentially grows and grows to the point where, as the kind of business model we have, where we want to have those step down processes, we're sort of facing, I don't want to say it's an undue burden, but it's very heavily skewed towards us, whereas the big tobacco companies, like Susan pointed out, they have these little devices. They come in one nicotine level. It's an extremely high nicotine level, and that's all they sell.
And I do think that's something we need to make sure in any legislation that, that, on the fee side, that it applies equally and is fair, to anyone. I know there were some other questions from committee members. Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your presentation. Can you explain to me what the business model looks like when you decide to go into the vape shop business? I guess the thing that I don't understand is we didn't have cigarette shops before. So what does the business model look like that you look at when you determine to go into this business?
I mean, presently now, right now, or
I think
back
in
when?
the day. when we
Okay,
started.
so
Yeah.
I'm going to start off, I started off as a roll your own tobacco shop. I was a former smoker. And at that time, I don't know if it would have been 2012, there were these machines, you could go into a gas station and you could put your tobacco in and the tubes would come out. And it was much cheaper than what we called manufactured cigarettes. There was a highway transportation bill. That's when I started learning about these bills that was thrown in there, that I, as a shop owner, could no longer do that because there was going to be I was a manufacturer. So there was going to be a manufacturing tax on that. I had just opened up and I had a 3-year lease. I was like, what am I going to do here? So after 2 years of researching that business, I had started to see these little tiny, and from California vapor bowl things. And I thought, nobody's going to do this and whatnot. Did a lot of research, and that's what I had to do. I had a 3-year lease I had to figure out. And then I ended up quitting smoking because of a vapor device. And I was like, oh, okay, wow. And then I first started off with selling the roll your own tobacco supplies.
So as far as, we had a sort of similar story. I mean, oftentimes, at least I know nowadays, it seems like, especially everywhere, there's a smoke shop on every corner. It seems like it's almost a government subsidized industry where people are just like somehow collecting boatloads of money, which I just completely don't understand. But back in the day, oftentimes it was smaller situations like Susan mentioned, where you have someone who tries the product. And mind you, this was early 2012, 2013, 2014, when the, mass market products like that didn't exist, or were at least a lot worse. People try it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But they weren't available in the vast majority of areas. It was a lot smaller industry at the time, and you couldn't find them at gas stations or anything like that. So people, they tried it, they were passionate about it, and then they went out into their community and opened up a store. Granted, like I said, it was a lot smaller. There was a lot less going on, so you had to do some searching, and there were less distributors, but you'd often meet with manufacturers at trade shows and things like that, and network that way, and then to sell the products. Most of it is stuff we order online. Oftentimes, especially with the liquids. Back in the day, I think they did have some that were made overseas, but the general market consensus was they were really bad. So the vast majority of liquids, at least that I know of, and that we sell on our shelves, are all made in the US at labs that you could go to. I mean, I've been to several of the labs. They're ISO 7 certified, and you have to wear the whole get up just to get in where they're mixing the liquids. And most of the places, like I said, you can visit yourself. So I hope that answered your question.
That's fine.
Other questions, Representative Washburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. When you sell, and thank you for being here, I'm learning a lot about this business. I've never vaped. I did smoke Marlboro Reds when I was a young man, and haven't in a long time. But I'm curious, when you sell the non-FDA approved product, is that a lot less expensive for you to buy at the wholesale level than the FDA approved product? In other words, do you make more money selling the non-approved?
No. Actually, these are typically what I call gas station, the Enjoy Views and whatnot. And me personally, I don't buy into that product. All of the e-liquids, from the distros and the manufacturers, I purchase. I have my vape license. They also pay, from, 4 years ago when we started the vape tax, they pay my Georgia tax, which is always shown on my invoice. Is it cheaper? Actually, probably not. This was, I think, like $3 or something when I had my receipt. Yeah, it must be at my desk, but yeah. So whereas my liquids are, around $19.99. So when you say, is it cheaper and I'm making more money, I would not say no.
So you don't buy that product less expensively than if you were buying the big tobacco product?
Correct. That is extremely high nicotine. I sell open-end systems, which is a whole nother device.
The profit margins, I would say, are very similar as far as those products that have passed through the FDA process versus the ones that we sell now that are the ones that are on hold.
Another question, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious about the step down. A lot of the emails I get, people are giving me stories about how they were able to quit smoking. You just gave a compelling story about your husband and how he did it, but I'm confused about this. Am I hearing you correctly that your husband was able to quit smoking because of the flavored?
Yes.
Well, that is confusing to me, because when I smoked those Marlboro Reds, I enjoyed that tobacco taste. And so why can't you still step down levels of nicotine without having some flavoring that would be perhaps quite attractive to the kids.
Correct. He wanted to do something that wasn't like a cigarette, and it provided him nicotine because he tried nicotine patches, lozenges, gum, all of that. He needed the hand and mouth, and he wanted that the visual part of the addiction to it. Flavors
So
were
he
better.
wanted the Elvis flavor rather than the traditional
Yeah.
tobacco flavor.
And that's one question I'll ask my new customers coming in. Do you want something that is similar to a nicotine or a tobacco flavor? Because tobacco is a flavoring. When you look at it, it's still a flavoring. Or do you want something, you know, and because all the different types. I've never bought into the IP infringement type things. I mean, I've gone through a long time of doing this and doing what morally correct I think is, and that's not, you know, IP infringements or cartoon characters. I've always put my foot down. Bucky, who's been in a lot of these, I know Dylan's the same way. You're not going to see a Captain Crunch e-liquid on my wall
So-
because
Sorry, just to add to that, I spoke last time, I don't believe you were present, but I had mentioned something sort of similar to Susan. We have 10 stores and we have 10,000 regular customers probably a month. And I've maybe seen 50,000 people just myself through the store, which not to say that's anything scientific or significant, but just from my personal perspective, similar to what Susan said, oftentimes when someone comes in, we're going through the process and we don't make any health claims as this will help you quit smoking. But our first question is, how many cigarettes a day did you smoke? So we can sort of gauge what nicotine level to match them with. Usually for an open system is about 6 milligrams is what works for them at a medium power level. And then the second question is do you want something tobacco flavored or non-tobacco flavored? And the vast majority of the time, like Susan said, is non-tobacco flavored. Now, my experience with people is that they want something as far away from tobacco flavor because hitting the vape that tastes like tobacco just makes them want the high nicotine. There's like a different rush of nicotine because you're at a lower nicotine level compared to a really high nicotine level. And then obviously there's all the other chemicals that go into a cigarette. That tobacco just makes them want. It's like, I guess I would say a non-alcoholic beer for an alcoholic. It makes them want the alcohol, right? So separating it and giving them something that tastes really good where they're still getting the nicotine allows them to sort of set it to the side. Now, like you said, there are definitely, I'd say around 10 to 15%. I would probably say even lower, but conservatively, there are a certain percentage of people who want something that tastes, like you said, Marlboro Red, we have a flavor, American Patriots, dead on Marlboro Red, that's all they want. And those people, ride or die, will stick with that flavor till the end of time, right? But then obviously the people who tend to do fruit flavors, they might switch around with fruit flavors. So hopefully that helps out.
Was not able to be at our last meeting
All good.
because of a conflict. So thanks for sharing that with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. And we have one more question from Representative Maynard. And while she asked that, I want to ask one other question. But we are running
Yeah, sorry.
overtime. No, y'all been, it's not your fault. Y'all been doing great and I appreciate you taking a few questions.
Of course.
One of the things that you had mentioned, I think both last week and today, was that there has been a change from where it used to be you weren't selling a whole lot of the disposable products, but now it is a significant portion. Would you mind, I don't know if you have the information, Susan, but in your stores, what percentage of your sales are the disposable products now?
ooh, it is, I almost want to say 50-50. And based off of that, when I talk to my customers, they're paying for convenience. And it bothers me. And I also have a little diagram showing them with an open pod system that they can get the same thing that they're getting from the disposable that goes into a whole other thing. It throws away goes into landfills and things like that. That they could, and it's cheaper by putting their own liquid in there and using it several times before the coil burns. And because in a device like this, if you could refill it and put e-liquid in there, the device would still work. You just can't because the coil would still work. So It's a trend though, that is going because people are paying for convenience, and higher nicotine. So, which is another thing that I'm trying to also encourage on the people who are still working on their disposable PMTAs and whatnot, that path. Have that step down, have the, the 50 go down to 24, go down to 18 and whatnot. Because that's my thing that I talk to my customers about is it's the only industry I know that I get excited that we lose a customer because they are no longer going to shop from me.
And you would say that that's been a significant change. So now you're at 50-50. It wasn't 50-50 a few years ago.
Correct.
Representative Maynard, last question.
Thank you. Thank you for the report that you gave us. I did look up the morbidity and mortality report that you quoted. Within that report, one of the things it talked about was the ELF brand and all of the other different brands that the FDA has concerns about. And so thank you for saying in your business, you try to look at what those brands are and you're not putting them on your shelves. I think one of the things that concerns me is although you are being an outstanding business citizen, there are many people that are not. You've testified that these vape shops are popping up on every corner. All of those vape shop owners are not being as diligent as you are. So now we have a mass group of vape shop owners that potentially are not being as diligent as you, putting children at risk. So my two questions for you, that's just a little background. My two questions for you. You mentioned that since you can dictate these levels of nicotine, this is an addiction, right? And oftentimes when you're dealing with addictions, and the previous professor called it a gateway drug. So one of my concerns is if we have this gateway drug and we have non-therapists, non-physicians dictating nicotine levels to adults, how safe is that, right? And the other question I have for you is, you also mentioned, I know I'm asking like several questions at once, but you mentioned you have thousands of customers, 10,000
between
customers.
all of our stores.
And so it's a big business, which is probably why so many are popping up on every corner. So how do you tell a person like me that used to work at CDC and provided the data for these morbidity and mortality reports? How do you tell a person like me that the business outweighs the health risk that come with it?
So I would say a couple things. And I did just send Brian, he gave me his business card last week. I sent him a whole document of the sources I used for what I spoke about and what Jake had spoken about last week. First things first, as far as the health, like what you're talking about, is the FDA has acknowledged that while it is not risk-free, obviously, vaping is safer than cigarettes. And that was something sort of to Representative Hughley's point about the public health costs that I believe she had asked Jake, is I agree that if there is a discrepancy, say vaping is theoretically, random numbers, say vaping is 50% healthier than smoking, but there's, a certain proportion of the cost that comes from vaping where it's not made up by that 50% safer, then I think, yeah, there's probably a reason to implement some kind of tax or something like that, which we're obviously not opposed to. We pay the 7% excise tax, and it seems to do well for the state. But additionally, I did send him a bunch of information about how flavors help adults quit smoking. It was a study of, I believe, 69,000 people, 82% said that they used flavors to quit smoking. Compare that to children who say 89%, I believe, use flavors. So there is a small discrepancy there, obviously, but I think the general consensus is that people like flavored things, not necessarily that either adults or children, slightly children in particular, I guess. But there are a bunch of studies similar to that I think would benefit, you'd benefit looking at, especially one the prior doctor had mentioned EVALI, e-cigarette or vapor associated lung injury, where there were, I don't think she was correct, I'm not a doctor, but it was 68 people who died instead of 62. But the research that was done on that, they took lung fluid samples from 51 people and tested it to find vitamin E acetate, which was used to cut illegal THC products. It was used to basically, take a certain amount of THC product and dilute it out to put into cartridges or whatever they might put it into. That product was found in 48 out of 51 of the samples they had. So about 96%. And then as for people who were tested, 82% said they used THC products. So you can look at, and I linked that data to Brian as well. It's on the CDC website, and that was self-reported. So overwhelmingly, I would say that, there were probably kids who didn't want to admit they were using THC, who said, oh, I was just using nicotine, not THC, to their parents. So you can look at that yourself as well. I don't know. Was there anything I missed there? Oh, you talked about business. I forget what.
And we're gonna have to move on here in a second, but if there's one
Yeah,
other,
thank you.
Cool. Yeah. And
Gary had one quick question.
I don't mean to be way off on this, but where does the illegal THC come from? I mean, are there shops that's got the back room that are selling that? I mean, with these shops popping up on every single corner, and they are in our community. I'm
Yeah.
sure they
Yeah.
are everywhere, but
so back in the day, I believe what the consensus was is there was like a brand, quote unquote, called Dr. Dank or something like, or Dank Vapes, I
Dank
think
Vape.
it was. And what people are doing is they were buying off Alibaba these cartridges and a matching box that had this brand on it, and they would take it to their house and fill it up with product and sell it as if it were a legitimate product just on the streets. So that was primarily, I think it was like 60 to 70% of the people who had EVALI said they got their product off of a like street, basically informal. So friends, family, or like a drug dealer or something like that. So it was overwhelmingly drug dealers.
so I had a conversation with somebody on the way up here today that their son texted them yesterday, and that somebody that so-and-so greened out. Does that mean anything to you? Which the explanation was over THC in the restroom yesterday at school.
So
So somehow that product's getting there,
Yeah.
getting in these.
So hemp is legal in Georgia, and the Department of Agriculture now is regulating certain portions of the hemp industry. So I would say they probably did. They probably bought a legal hemp product and were just using it in the bathroom, if I had to guess. Which they are, so relative to like 2019 when EVALI was happening. And since then, there have been no reported cases because the vape industry, our industry, does not use vitamin E acetate in anything. It never has. And all the products that we sell that have submitted PMTAs, their recipes are on the FDA record. You can check. None of them contain vitamin E acetate. But there are still a lot of hemp products out there that people are probably getting their hands on. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
of course.
And thank you all for always being willing to join us. And
Thank you for
obviously, I
having
know we'll continue the conversation as we get closer to session. Ben Cowart with the Georgia Retailers Association is going to speak for 2 minutes, 30 seconds. We like that. Good. No, y'all, trust me, y'all were great, and appreciate you taking questions. 30 seconds.
Yeah, Chairman Gaines, members of
Start
the
the
committee.
timer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak for you today. I'll be quick. I know we're running over time. So my name is Ben Cowart. I am Service Vice President of Government Affairs at Georgia Retailers. Georgia Retailers is a statewide business advocacy organization that's represented the retail industry here in Georgia for more than 60 years. And on behalf of our association, really wanted to thank you guys for the work that you're doing on this committee. Georgia Retailers was a supporter of the chairman's bill last session, and that would create the statewide vapor directory similar to the state tobacco directory, and would like to thank him for his work on that bill last session. So we feel that a state regulated directory would provide clarity on which products are legally authorized for sale in Georgia. This would improve industry compliance and transparency, especially as FDA regulations remain slow and unclear. So just like Georgia's directory for lawful cigarette sales, a clear list of approved vape products would not only offer transparency, but ensure that consumers have access to properly vetted products. So the need for this directory is highlighted, as we've heard in many of these meetings, by the widespread availability of unregulated and unauthorized flavored disposable vape products, many of which are illegally imported from China. So these products continue to evade FDA oversight and pose serious health risks to citizens. Establishing a state directory would help address this issue, protect the public health, and ensure a level playing field for responsible retailers. So thank you for the opportunity. Happy to take any questions.
Representative Maynard.
It's a really quick question. One, you said most of the products, well, it's two questions. One, you said most of the products are coming illegally from China through our ports. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure exactly where they're coming through. We do know that a lot of the illegal disposable vape products are being manufactured, that are on the shelves, are being manufactured in China.
And then the next question is, just as a representative for the retail organizations throughout the state, do you know of any amount of legal action that has come across through your clients, like from parents whose child may have?
From our association, we have not had any legal action, but really what our association is asking for is just real clarity and transparency from the state on which products are lawfully allowed to be sold in the state.
So not your organization, but the retail outlets. Do you know of any of your clients that have been sued because they?
I'm not aware of any that have been sued. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does your people in your association sell the product that maybe the vape stores we're talking about? I mean, do they have that on their shelves also? Or
No,
do
sir.
Most of them have the.
Most of our members are some of your larger big box or larger convenience stores that are just selling the approved products.
Thank you as always. Appreciate you being here and
Appreciate it. Thank you.
look forward to continuing the conversation. I know we had a couple folks maybe from either the Cobb and or Gwinnett law enforcement agencies. I don't know if they were going to come. Are you here? Okay, they maybe had to leave. I think we had some folks here earlier, but I was going to give them a chance to speak if they wanted to. We're going to wrap up with Scott Drinkard. Scott, if you want to come on up, and if it's okay with the committee, I know we're supposed to wrap up by 3, but Scott, you came in from somewhere out of town, right?
Washington, DC.
At the swamp. So thank you for being here. We
I
won't.
escaped for a little bit.
What's that?
I escaped for a little
Good,
bit.
good. Well, welcome to America, and we'll try to be about 25 minutes. Does that work, Scott? We'll go a few minutes
Certainly.
over. Is that okay?
Just get
We're
this
trying to
queued up
get,
real quick.
Oh,
Perfect.
there we go. Good. All right. Thank you, Scott.
It works. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Scott Drinkard. I'm a director of public policy at Altria. We are the parent company of Enjoy LLC, which is an e-vapor company that's headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. I'm happy to speak today on the illicit e-vapor market problem, particularly in Georgia, and really appreciative of the deep dive that this kind of session allows. I'm going to talk about really 3 things today. First is the scale of the problem and how it's changed in the last couple of years. The second is federal policy and actions that have happened at the federal level, and then also some of the gaps that have been left unaddressed that states are starting to pick up the slack on. And then the third one is what Georgia can do to address the e-vapor illicit market. So let's first talk about the size of the problem. It's getting worse each day. And in fact, since legislation was considered in the regular session, we've seen the illicit market for Chinese disposable vapes continue to grow. Here I have a graph over time of adult vapor user counts from 2020 until today. And as you can see, the largest and growing component of what adult vapors are consuming is disposables, which are almost always illicit products and are almost always products manufactured in China by the China tobacco monopoly, which is part and parcel of the Chinese Communist Party.
Sorry to interrupt. So the cartridge, is that, are those the products that have been approved, or those the 34, or where do the 34 that have been approved fall in here?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to get there. But great question. You're correct. There are the pods products. All that cartridge means is that the battery is separatable from the liquid component.
But that's where on this chart, the 34 legal ones, or the FDA approved, would fall under cartridge.
Yes, they'd be in those blue lines as well. And
But
then I also have
none of them would fall under the disposable. category.
there are a few disposable products actually which are manufactured by us, which are in a sort of they're in a smaller format. They don't have a really sizable market share though. But those are the only disposables that I know of. There are some that are interacting with the FDA process, but the vast majority of what's making up the disposable marketplace is illicit Chinese manufactured products.
interrupt.
Great
That
question,
was-
though. That is a really good question. So let's dive into that a little bit more. Why exactly are these products illegal? Well, there's a couple of key reasons. In general, what's going on with the Chinese manufactured illicit products is that they're not interacting in any way with the FDA's regulatory process. So here are some key dates where the FDA has asserted itself and either made rules or actions, or in one case, actually Congress stepping in and making a law. In 2016, as the professor pointed out earlier today, e-vapor products were brought into the FDA's purview. And at that time, the FDA froze the marketplace and said, products that are on market are okay and need to start preparing their PMTA applications, but no new products can be introduced during this time. Illicit manufacturers at that time introduced new products. And then in 2020, PMTA applications were finally due. And so lawful actors turned in their PMTA applications, and illicit manufacturers did not turn in PMTA applications, and then continued to introduce new products. And then in 2022, there was an issue where manufacturers started using synthetic nicotine, which the FDA said that they did not have the authority to regulate because it was not derived from tobacco. Congress stepped in 2022 and banned all of those products, and said, no, you can't market those products unless and until you receive a marketing granted order from the FDA. And this is really important because the FDA has authority over all aspects of the tobacco product's life. They have authority over the manufacturing, the marketing, and then the enforcement. So these products, which are manufactured in China, for example, are not subject to FDA facilities inspection over there, and they also have not complied with any kind of ingredients disclosure. So we don't know what is in these products. And we also don't know what kind of conditions they're being made in. And increasingly, these products are not being properly declared at Customs and Border Protection. So that means that they're being smuggled into the border by intentionally falsifying documents, meaning they are also sidestepping tariffs and any other kind of declarations that are due at import. This is a view of how the products get into the United States, which is sort of shocking for its sophistication. This could look like any just-in-time delivery service of any regular legal product that you might buy on Amazon, in terms of how much volume is moving through it, the fact that it is diversified across air cargo, across containers, and then it is moved by legitimate retailers or rather legitimate logistics companies once it gets into the United States. But the point that I want to make here is that FDA is starting to address this issue, and in recent months has even stood up a task force to look at the problem at the border. but they really do need help from states. It's estimated that about 3% of what's shipped to the United States by container is actually physically inspected. And so if Chinese manufacturers can get the product through Customs and Border Protection, it's basically home free. That's the part at which FDA and CBP are screening, but even in the best case, they cannot screen all products. We heard earlier today that sometimes the products are misdeclared or hidden in flashlights or something else to try and avoid that physical inspection so it never actually happens. So I know that this problem is an issue nationwide, but I also have learned that it's an issue in Georgia. If you have not been sort of on a market walk, I would recommend it. I got off the plane yesterday and was able to purchase a product that I know to be illicit very, very easily. This is a product called Geek Bar. It's one of the newest ones that we've been seeing, and it's subject to an FDA warning letter. It's made by, well, I have a board here actually of the company that makes it. It is made by iMiracle Shenzhen Technology, which is the same company that makes the rather infamous Elf Bar. One of the things that we've seen from the Chinese manufacturers that are attempting to sidestep the law is they are constantly changing the brand names of the products that they are selling. They're also changing the names of their subsidiaries. So while iMiracle Shenzhen is the parent company, they launched a few subsidiaries. This one is called Kizatech. And actually, there's a picture right here of their facility that's in a state-owned enterprises development zone. So when I say that these products are being manufactured by the China tobacco monopoly, they really are part and parcel with the CCP, and they're being sold in really, really large quantities. And once they enter the United States, they're sort of in the more legitimate retail and wholesale environment. And it's hard unless you have a state enforcement activity to be able to get them off of shelves. So the frustrating thing about this to me is that while this product was sold to me by a retailer that is disregarding FDA regulation, the people that are really losing out are the Georgia businesses that are trying their best to comply with federal law. And so any kind of attempt to clean this marketplace up really is to their benefit, the people that are currently being wronged by this system of smuggled goods. So a couple of other states are starting to act on this, and I wanted to just share at least one really good story and also make clear sort of what a directory policy does. The way that 11 states have looked at this, and the way that of 11 states that have passed laws that strengthen enforcement on e-vapor have looked at it, is to pass a law that provides a green list of products that can be sold, and any product that's not on that green list cannot be sold. Georgia already has something very similar for cigarettes on the books. There's a cigarette directory, and if you're not on the cigarette directory, you cannot be sold in the state of Georgia. This is very similar and not a reinvention of the wheel. We've talked a lot about different numbers today. One of the numbers that's been mentioned is the 34 products that are authorized for sale in the United States. Those would be included in the directory, but I also want to make clear that any product that's interacting with the regulatory system would also be authorized for sale, whether that product is pending at the FDA or whether that product is the subject of a court action and is being protected by the courts. Any product that's making a willful effort to engage with the regulatory system can still be sold in Georgia under what was considered in HB 1260 earlier this session. So Louisiana is the state that's farthest along in enacting this policy. Their directory was enacted or rather their directory, the list itself was published in November of last year. And we have some data in that strongly indicates that it's accomplishing its intended purpose. On the red line, on the graph on the left, I have illicit vapor products. And then on the blue line on the graph on the left is products that are on the directory. And you can see how the magnitudes of these products changed as the policy went into effect. Now, we got a bonus from the sort of data analysis perspective in that this policy was turned on in November of 2023. And then actually it was paused briefly because there was litigation around the policy. There was a single subject rule court challenge. So there was a temporary restraining order, which the state eventually prevailed. But what we get from the data analysis perspective is you get to see the policy turn off and then turn on again. So there's sort of three observations here, which are marked with lines. So when the policy turns on and the directory is published, you can see that illicit vapor products in tracked channels in the state in Louisiana functionally go to 0. And then on the blue line, you can see the directory vapor products, regulated products, ones that are engaging with FDA regulation, go up right at that time. And then when the temporary restraining order gets put into effect and the policy is on pause, you can see that illicit vapor products sales go up almost instantaneously and directory products go down. And then the policy gets reinstated and the illicit products fall to 0 again, and directory sanctioned products are grow in quantity again. One of the concerns with this policy is that it could drive adult consumers back to cigarettes, which would be very problematic. From the data we have, that does not seem to be going on. On the right, in Louisiana, we have cigarette sales in blue, and then the balance of the 49 states in orange. So that you can see there's some seasonality in cigarette sales, so you have to look at them together. You can see that those lines are moving in trend with each other, even with the policy going into effect, out of effect, and then back into effect. So the policy is having its intended goal, which is to move consumers away from unregulated e-vapor products and into regulated e-vapor products, not moving consumers back into cigarettes. So in conclusion, this policy, the policy of an e-vapor directory, is one that's being implemented in more and more states. It enhances consumer safety and protection, promotes youth access prevention, and continues to provide choice for adults. And we can see that it actually works from the data in the state that's furthest along in implementing it. Thank you so much for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Might be interesting. I don't know if it's possible to do this, but usage among kids in Louisiana, if that is brought that down. I don't know if you have any information on that.
The data lags a little bit, so we don't have because this policy went into place in November of 23. We don't yet have a state specific youth e-vapor data. We have national e-vapor data, which I think was mentioned earlier. The trend is going down on youth use of e-vapor, but we don't have a Louisiana specific statistic at this time. I will say that of the brands that are listed by youth in the National Youth Tobacco Survey, which was just put out either 2 or 3 weeks ago, the illicit products were the top 3 brands listed as being used by youth. So the illicit problem is very much a youth problem.
Yeah, and I would assume it has a positive impact on lowering usage among kids, because it does seem like a lot of the disposable products that are illegal are geared towards kids. We saw in some of our testimony earlier that there were USB shaped vapes, milk carton shaped vapes, and basically the whole purpose was to allow kids to take it into school. So anyway, questions from the committee? Representative Maynor.
Your slide, FDA regulation, just from a policy perspective, given that the FDA does have so much responsibility on trying to regulate this, what kind of suggestions or which category do you think would be most appropriate for the state to try to take some of this responsibility away, if you will? Are we more prepared, in your opinion, to look at the manufacturing side, the marketing side, or the enforcement piece?
I think the enforcement piece, but there's some things that under federal law the state cannot do, right? So there's some preemption that the Tobacco Control Act put forward and sort of reserve those powers only for the FDA to do. But on the enforcement, states have the authority to control what's on retail shelves in their state. And in this space, especially, we can see FDA taking some actions including civil monetary penalties against retailers. But there's hundreds of thousands of retailers in this country, and there's only so much that the FDA can do to sort of police at retail. States, by contrast, usually through their departments of revenue, already have an existing relationship with the wholesaler community in the state, and then also in many cases with retailers, because they usually pay sales tax. So departments of revenue especially, but other agencies as well at the state level already know who these businesses are, and it makes sense to share some of that authority. I think, though, the most important thing about the directory policy is that it relies on voluntary compliance. It provides a public list of what can be sold so that the ambiguity is taken away from the equation. One of the things that we've heard from retailers, wholesalers, really anybody in the space is it's not clear what's legal to be sold. This is the state saying, this is a list. If it's on the list, you may sell it. If it's not, you may not, which is, again, already how it's done in the cigarette marketplace. And I think I think Louisiana shows that it can work really well. Thank you.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. One of the things that we've heard from several speakers is that this type of regulation that we're looking at will create a black market. Can you speak to that?
Well, there's already a black market. The market is 64% illicit today. And it's unfortunate that has happened. I think what's important is making sure that the directory has both the products that are authorized and also the ones that have done everything to comply with the regulatory process, but are just still waiting in line. And to the extent that they're submitting themselves to scientific review, those products should continue to be sold. In Louisiana, the directory has over 300 products that can be sold. And in Alabama, another state, there's a difference in the fee structure in those two states. There's about 1,300 products on Alabama's directory. So I think it's really important to protect adult consumer choice, the choices for adults, but also to make sure that the products that are being sold are vetted and regulated.
Any final questions? Well, Scott, we really appreciate you being here, and thank you for your insight. That's
you.
all we have for today. In terms of a next meeting, I don't know if we will have another meeting. If we do, it'll be either in October or November. The committee will discuss, and we'll be talking with Brian. I want to thank Brian again for his work on this and see if we need a final meeting to wrap up recommendations and such. But I certainly have heard a lot of testimony. And the 3 meetings we've had, I think it's been pretty interesting. I think we realize how big of a challenge this is, both with the kids across our state and also with the illegal marketplace that we have. And so we're going to work on trying to address those challenges. And so the committee will be considering that. And again, I don't know for sure at this time whether we'll have a 4th meeting, but if anybody here or watching would like to speak to the committee, please reach out to us so we can determine whether we need a 4th hearing. But we are going to be taking that under consideration. But again, it won't be in the next few weeks. It'll be mid to late October or November would be our time frame. Does anybody on the committee have any final comments? Representative Maynor.
I have a final comment. I believe it was last year, I actually did an op-ed about flavor vapor use. And the reason I did the op-ed was, and we haven't talked about this really so far in the study committee, but I was approached by a federal lobbyist to support a letter to Congress saying that flavored vapor products were disproportionately impacting African Americans negatively, meaning if we were to put restrictions on flavor products, it's mostly African Americans that are using the flavored products. And so it was disproportionately affecting them negatively. And so I did not agree with that statement, just, one being a healthcare provider, also working at CDC, the thought came of, okay, well, why would we, if it is mainly affecting African Americans, why wouldn't we want to save African Americans from getting lung cancer or being addicted to these nicotine products? So I would also like, if anyone out there in the public has an opinion about that, to come forward and prove me wrong.
Certainly, and if there is anybody out there, please reach out to me or Representative Maynor, and that may be cause for a fourth meeting. And certainly, again, if there's other folks that want to be heard, we want to make sure there's that opportunity. I think we've been able to hear from everybody who has requested, including everybody from law enforcement, educators, to students, to parents, to vape shop owners, to many other folks who are interested in this topic. So I wanted to say thank you for all of the testimony we've heard. And again, I will be in touch about if we have a fourth meeting, but thank you all for participating, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. This meeting is adjourned.